Number 10. El Matador. El Matador is just a skilled, well, matador. Because of this, he is very fast and agile, but not at a superhuman level. Also, spoiler alert, not a lot of these characters will be superhuman because, you know, it's Hawkeye. El Matador is also a skilled combatant who has proficiency with swords. In the comics, El Matador ended up kidnapping Kate Bishop, who only managed to escape due to one of Hawkeye's arrows. Hawkeye had been keeping an eye on El Matador, and because of this he knew that he was up to no good. And El Matador ended up basically getting distracted by one of Hawkeye's arrows. This is the moment where Kate became a huge Hawkeye fan, as like in the live Disney Plus streaming series, she saw Hawkeye as her savior. Another event in her life would prompt her to train, but it was actually the villain El Matador that brought our two Hawkeyes together. Originally, El Matador was a Daredevil villain in the comics, although he isn't super powerful and he has been affiliated with other heroes before. He is a pretty important Hawkeye villain for the fact that he brought, you know, both Hawkeyes together. So I thought, I'll tell you about him, and also you'll learn some facts. Number 9. Tracksuit Draculas. The Tracksuit Draculas were made famous in Matt Fraction's run of Hawkeye. They are a gang in New York who buy up property and then jack up the rent as they see fit. Basically the worst kind of landlords. Hawkeye dubs them in the David Aja and Matt Fraction series the Tracksuit Draculas, or Tracksuit Mafia. Instead of allowing them to bully and threaten the tenants, demanding more money and repossessing their stuff when they refuse or are unable to pay it, Hawkeye decided to buy the building from them. However, this doesn't end up being a permanent solution, and instead Clint ends up involved in a full-out gang war with a target on his back. Fortunately, he is able, with the help of his friends and tenants of the building, to fight back and defeat the Tracksuit Draculas and head goon Ivan. While they might not sound intimidating, the Tracksuit Draculas are a very determined, stubborn bunch who also have the numbers and resources to challenge Hawkeye as he attempts to fight against them. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more Hawkeye lists, if you are loving the series, let us know. And if you've read the Matt Fraction and David Aja series, also let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Also, just like shout it in the comments. I want to know your thoughts. I want to know your feelings and your emotions. I want to know, do you love Hawkeye? Are you a Hawkeye stan like me? Number 8. The Clown. The Clown appeared to be an expert shot and skilled assassin who often dressed like a clown or a mime when he went out to do his missions. He was the one responsible for taking out Grills in the comics, who was Hawkeye's neighbor during the David Aja and Matt Fraction run. The Clown was actually a Kazimirchek who suffered a very traumatic experience at a young age, which seemed to have driven him to a life of killing, causing him to become a hired gun and assassin. Kazimirchek ended up being hired by a number of mob leaders to eliminate Clint Barton. He caused a lot of grief for Clint and even managed to shoot him, but in the end Clint disarmed him and defeated him with a toothpick. Which sounds like it would be really lame for the Clown, but really just goes to show you how deadly and badass Clint is. Cause he also did that while he was shot. He was like, I'm just gonna flick this and you're done. You're out. If you think John Wick is cool with his pencil, you gotta see some of these people with their toothpicks and Marvel. Number 7. TRICKSHOT. Barney Barton is the brother of Hawkeye, and you might think this means he simply can't be an enemy. After all, brothers, you know, they take care of each other and they stick together, right? And of course Barney is the older of the two. Well, Clint and Barney's relationship is a bit more complicated than that. It's true that when Clint really needs him and vice versa, the two are often there for one another. They do support each other when it comes down to it, but also, they've fought a few times before. Like his brother Clint, Charles Barney Barton is also an extremely skilled archer. While the two started out amicably in life, although not always seeing eye to eye, but always looking out for one another's best interests, Barney would later fall into the hands of Baron Zemo, who would manipulate Barney into turning against his brother, as Zemo himself wanted revenge on Hawkeye. This was the beginning of an on-again and off-again feud between the two that would continue for years in the comics. Barney took the name TRICKSHOT after his teacher, who trained Clint along Swordsman, and this was the beginning of his life as a villain and a criminal. Number 6. CROSSFIRE. Well, maybe not one of the most well-recognized villains on this list, when it comes to CROSSFIRE and Hawkeye, the feud is pretty personal. CROSSFIRE was a villain of Clint's who initially thought to use the Avenger to get to other superpowered beings of a higher caliber. CROSSFIRE basically saw Hawkeye as being the weakest link in the team, which was what initially brought the two into conflict. CROSSFIRE was like, he's the bottom of the barrel, he'll be the easiest one for me to get. CROSSFIRE attempted to capture Hawkeye, manipulating him into attacking his colleague and love interest Mockingbird. While Hawkeye escaped and defeated CROSSFIRE and his team of hired villains, his hearing would permanently be damaged as a result of their initial battle. Like many other Hawkeye villains, CROSSFIRE doesn't possess superpowers, but he's a very skilled armed and unarmed fighter. He also happens to be fairly intelligent. Like, not Dr. Doom levels of intelligent, but still, smarter than your average villain. Number 5. Swordsman. Swordsman may have been Hawkeye's mentor, but this doesn't mean that the two were never at odds. In fact, Hawkeye was trained by Swordsman, but this didn't change Clint's feelings when he learned that Swordsman was stealing money from the circus that they were both employed to work for. Don't do that, Swordsman, that's villain stuff. Clint decided to report Swordsman's illegal activities, but before he could do so was stopped. As such, Swordsman escaped the authorities, getting away before Clint was able to report him. Swordsman is dead currently in the comics, so not super powerful. Like Clint's Hawkeye, Swordsman never really had superpowers, but was just an insanely skilled fighter when it came to his sword fighting skills, and his skills really with all bladed weapons. More recently, there was a living version of him in the main continuity, but that version was brought back to life by the Katati after he died in his human form. Katati Swordsman was part plant because Katati. This version of him too, though, is also now dead. Also, I know what some people are probably gonna say, Swordsman, wait, isn't he like a hero? Swordsman is a hero, he's also been a villain. Like Hawkeye, he's complicated. He's a complicated character. And if you didn't get that, I mean, like I said, Katati Swordsman was also a thing. So yeah, there's a lot of, it's complicated. Comics. Number 4. Madame Masque. When it comes to Kate Bishop's Hawkeye, one of the biggest villains around for her would be Madame Masque, the daughter of Count Nefaria. Kate became enemy number 1 for Madame Masque, who was hell-bent on destroying her after Kate managed to kidnap and impersonate her at an exclusive black market auction in Madripoor. Kate did this to try and acquire a tape that had what appeared to be incriminating evidence of Clint killing a dictator. She did it to try and help Hawkeye, basically. Kate managed to get the tape, but in the process made a major enemy of Madame Masque. Madame Masque is Giulietta Nefaria. While she doesn't have any superpowers, she is extremely influential, often depicted as being pretty wealthy, and is a skilled fighter. She has both physical prowess and flexibility, and is depicted as being proficient with firearms. She also has basically an army of clones at her disposal, so that's also a thing. While it's unclear if Madame Masque will appear yet in the Hawkeye streaming series, it seems pretty likely. Not only does she have ties to Kate, but she also has ties to her family too. In this version of the story, I would not be surprised if Madame Masque is even more closely connected to Kate. Perhaps her mother's maiden name is Nefaria? I'm just getting some sus vibes from Eleanor in the series personally. It should be noted as well at this point that I've only watched up to episode 2 of the series, so if this is playing in the future, whatever has happened since, I haven't seen that yet. So if you in the comments are like, oh my gosh, Eleanor was evil and we already saw it, I haven't seen that, or if you're like, oh, it was already confirmed that she's not Madame Masque, I also haven't seen that, so sorry. Number 3. Bullseye. Another villain who doesn't really have any superpowers, but really doesn't need them to be considered dangerous, is Bullseye. Bullseye would end up joining Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers during the days of Hammer's reign, following the dissolution of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the aftermath of Secret Invasion. Guess who Bullseye was standing in for? Hawkeye, of course. He wore the Hawkeye mantle in Clint Barton's absence, which of course only intensified the bad blood between these two. Bullseye, like Clint, is known for his deadly accuracy and the fact that he pretty much never misses his target, making him a powerful and deadly assassin. Also, I'm not sure if he still has it, but he did once have a partially coated adamantium skeleton. I think his legs or something were part like adamantium in there. Back in the days when almost everyone was getting an adamantium upgrade, Bullseye did too. Before we firmly established, of course, how rare that metal is supposed to be in the world of Marvel, so now you can never find it, but back then it was like, is that adamantium? Oh, there's some more. Oh, I'm just gonna put some adamantium like in my hair. Who cares? It's falling out of the sky. JK, it's really rare, so no more of that. No more adamantium hair. Number 2. Taskmaster. You might associate Taskmaster Antonia Drakova with Black Widow in the MCU, but in the comics, Tony Masters is Taskmaster, and he is well known as an Avengers villain. And it is through his clashes with that team that Taskmaster became a recurring villain of Hawkeye's as well. The two have had some pretty epic fights over the years, with Masters himself possessing the marksmanship of Hawkeye and also being known as a villain who is proficient with a bow and trick arrows. In fact, Taskmaster is so well known for his use of arrows that many MCU fans believe that Taskmaster's identity in the Black Widow film could be that of Clint Barton himself, because we saw him with arrows, we know Clint Barton has arrows, and a lot of MCU fans were like, could that be the thing? But no, Taskmaster is also just good at arrows. Hence why he's a good villain for Hawkeye. Arrows. And that version of Taskmaster that we saw in the film was not Hawkeye, but did learn from watching Hawkeye. In the comics, Taskmaster has an eidetic memory, or a photographic memory, that also extends to him being able to replicate any abilities or skill sets that he sees. Hence why he's number 2 on this list, cause yeah, that's really powerful. Number 1. The Avengers. While the Avengers are heroes, not villains, and technically Hawkeye is famous for being a member of the team, initially Hawkeye started out as one of their villains. Well, he wanted to become a hero himself actually, but instead ended up Black Widow's partner in crime, back when Natasha herself was also a villain. In fact, Clint was a major factor when it came to Black Widow becoming a hero herself and ultimately joining the Avengers eventually. The reality was that Hawkeye only became known as a villain due to a misunderstanding. He was mistaken for a thief during his first outing as a hero, and as such he pretty much became a villain for a while. Eventually he and Black Widow would end up on the heroic side of things, and both would join the Avengers, fighting with them instead of against them. But it goes without saying that on his list of most powerful opponents, the classic Avengers would probably be pretty high up there. Also, they're a whole team, so yeah. And a superpowered team at that. Prior to Hawkeye joining up, the team roster was primarily heroes, Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Ant-Man, or Giant Man as Hank was known then, and Wasp. The roster changed up in issue 16 of Avengers, with Hawkeye joining alongside former X-Men villains Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver.
In at 10, Werewolf by Night. The first time we've seen Moon Knight in the comics actually wasn't in his own series, but rather Werewolf by Night number 32. He faced off against Jack Russoff, aka Werewolf by Night, making Russoff his enemy. However, technically, Moon Knight was the villain in this scenario, hence its placement at number 10. Jacob Russoff is a werewolf, but unlike his dad, also a werewolf, Jack could control when and where he would transform, not just under a full moon. He had much more control over his abilities in werewolf form as well, except for when there was a full moon, because that's when Jack would be at his strongest but also completely out of control, which is a concept that sounds a lot like a D&D character. His superpowers include werewolf physiology along with superhuman strength, speed, durability, agility, stamina, a healing factor, and of course a hairy body packed with a nasty set of teeth and killer claws, something the ladies love. In at 9, Morpheus. Morpheus first appeared in Moon Knight number 12 back in the early 80s, and he's one of the rare horrifying characters that people actually feel sympathy for. Despite his vampiric appearance, he should not be mistaken for Morbius. This is a different person. The character who's getting the standalone movie, no one knows what universe it's in. Yeah, Morbius is indeed a pseudo-vampire, while Morpheus is something else entirely. His real name is Robert Markham, and he got sick from an old virus that caused segments of his DNA to be inhibited by the virus. He sought medical attention, and Dr. Peter Alron gave him an untested to help him, but it all backfired, causing Markham to change dramatically appearance-wise while also taking away Markham's need for sleep and giving him unfathomable psionic powers. However, the lack of sleep rendered him crazy, after which he had taken the alias Morpheus after the Olympian god of dreams. With his newfound powers, Morpheus sought revenge upon Alron, only to encounter Moon Knight in the process. And it ain't Count Nefaria. While Count Nefaria wasn't purely evil at first, his desire for more wealth and power is ultimately his downfall, and he's very nefarious. He has been around for years and years, fighting almost every single Avenger he can think of. He also encountered Moon Knight after Mark Spector moved to LA and joined the West Coast Avengers, primarily becoming his villain. Count Nefaria is immortal and has an unfathomably strong healing factor, because you know he's immortal. He received energy projection from the living laser, strength from Power Man, and speed from Whirlwind, all amplified 100 times. He can lift well over 100 tons, fly over 5,000 miles per hour, teleport, power, leech another person's energy, and so much more. However, it's likely that if you are a fan of Moon Knight, you knew about this guy, so he's not very high on the list. But honestly, not having known much about Moon Knight before this list, aside from he looks freaking awesome, all these villains are pretty new to me, so it's pretty cool getting to see all the characters that this guy has faced, and hopefully you at least hear about a few that you didn't know about. But no complaining if you're a Moon Knight superfan, okay? That's not allowed. That's cheating. And it's 7, DEADZONE. There are a few characters more 90s than DEADZONE, but he has his appeal. DEADZONE sort of emulates the classic Iron Man villain Whiplash with his electrical whips, but he's less a mercenary than just an ideological warrior. He seeks to punish sinners by lashing them to death, that has him run afoul with Moon Knight. DEADZONE first appeared in Moon Knight's solo title and is pretty evenly matched for the character. When Moon Knight tried to take him down with his adamantium, DEADZONE catches it and then turns it around on him. There is very little on the wiki about him, and honestly I don't know what else I could say about him, but he's trying to do what Moon Knight does, but going about it in an absolutely abysmal way. Like, come on bro, really? Whips? Like, I get that they're OP in like the Spider-Man PS4 game, but seem seriously underpowered in real life or in comic books, unless they need them for plot or you're into that kind of thing. And it's 6, Black Spectre. Carson Knowles was a veteran who returned home without applause. His job had been passed on and his wife left him with their son. He barely got by as a delivery man and found out his son was killed by phone. After his car was stripped for parts and a mugger accosted him, Knowles snapped and beat the man nearly to death. Seeking to destroy the city that treated him so badly, Carson Knowles ran as a dark horse candidate for mayor on his father's name and political connections. He also created a second identity as Black Spectre, beating and blackmailing the local precinct boss to support Knowles, and then in a fight with Moon Knight his mask slipped, but Moon Knight was unable to convince anyone that the mayoral candidate Knowles and Black Spectre were the same person. Eventually though, Moon Knight defeated Black Spectre in public, and his assistant Marlene Arlone uncovered Knowles' corrupt plans for the city and his political office. So at least he lost. Halfway through into number 5, Shadow Knight. Shadow Knight's real name is Randall Spectre, Mark's younger brother. He was envious of Mark his entire life, which turned him into a horrible criminal. There was a murderer on the streets killing nurses called the Hatchet Man, so Moon Knight used his girlfriend Marlene as like bait to catch the killer. The plan worked, but Marlene perished. Yeah, and to make matters even worse, the Hatchet Man was revealed to be Randall. Randall later joined the cult of Khonshu, which ultimately resulted in him receiving the same powers as his brother Mark. However, he ended up choosing to use them for evil, donning the pseudonym Shadow Knight. Because, you know, every character needs to have a reverse version of themselves. Reverse Flash, Dark Archer, Bizarro. It was devastating for Mark to fight his brother and ultimately kill him by slitting his throat with a throwing crescent. Yeah, it doesn't get much worse than that, especially when you learn that Mark tried protecting Randall their entire lives. But then again, he killed your girlfriend, so. In at 4, Midnight Man. Originally a collector of art, Anton Mogart would commit robberies at the stroke of midnight to build his collection. When Moon Knight stops him, he seemingly drowns in a river, but instead, he ends up becoming deformed by the waste found within the sewers. Then he goes insane and starts collecting trash, and teams with Bushman to defeat their sworn enemy. When Midnight Man finds out he's dying from cancer, he decides to find his son, hoping that he can share some of his final moments with him. Mogart does what he can to stop his son from turning to a life of crime like he once did, and in the wake of his death, he becomes the hero Midnight. It didn't last, and he ended up becoming a cyborg for the Secret Empire, which, while sounding bad, I think it would be kinda cool, like, to be a cyborg. Like, as long as I still have, like, my free will, and my programming isn't controlling me, because that just doesn't sound like fun. Like, I want to be able to turn my arm into a giant cannon. That'd be great. Someone tries to mug me, I'm just like, sorry. Getting close to the end, into number 3, Seth Falcon. He belongs to a Scottish sect of Knights Templar and has several amazing powers. I'll never do that accent again. Falcon first appeared in Mark Spectre Moon Knight number 43. Seth Falcon is immortal, has superhuman strength and stamina, but his strongest power is his touch. Using his clawed fingers, Falcon can drain the life force out of any living being, aging them in the process. If he holds his grip for long enough, Seth can drain the entire life out of somebody, all of it, turning them into a rotted skeleton. However, there's a catch. Due to biofeedback, the draining process backfires if Seth uses it on anybody who shares his DNA code, even partially. Simply put, he can't drain his relatives because it causes the series of issues that then hurts and weakens his powers. And yep, that's right. You guessed it, of course, Moon Knight turns out to be one of his long-lost relatives. So, Falcon has to rely on his superhuman strength and stamina to outlast Mark Spector in any mutual fight. Which is good, because that kind of like levels the playing field. Penultimately, in at number 2, Cactus. Sometimes a name is just a name. It can have meaning, or it could just be something cool that the guy thought of that ended up kind of making sense. Other times names are extremely direct and are probably too on point. That's the case with Cactus, who is exactly what he sounds like and nothing more. Created by Dominus, he's been a villain of the West Coast Avengers and Moon Knight on various occasions. Punching him definitely stings, but beyond that, it doesn't take all that much to break him or chop him up, because you know he's a cactus, which has actually happened before, though he can regenerate lost limbs, which I don't know if cactuses can do or cacti can do, but yeah, he's without a doubt one of the lamest villains in the Marvel Universe, but in my opinion, that makes him one of the coolest. This guy is literally a cactus, and that's hilarious. A couple years ago, the girl I was with at the time and I came up with a superhero that we called Cact Guy, who was basically in essence Cactus, and we didn't know that it was actually a thing. But it's funny to me that someone actually made this and then put it in the goddamn Marvel universe. That's hilarious, that's amazing, and Cactus is my new favorite villain ever because of that. Hashtag Cactus in the MCU. And finally, in at number 1, Hunter's Moon. Dr. Batter was born in Luxor, Egypt to 2 doctors and was an excellent student throughout his life, eventually becoming a doctor as well. He grew to become a very rational and serious person who didn't believe in any higher entities, despite still attending prayer and studying the Quran and the Hadith. This all changed when he was attacked by vampires and left to die on the streets, at which point he met the Egyptian moon god Khonshu. Dr. Batter survived and became a worshipper of Khonshu, who fancied himself the god's second highest priest, and opposite of Mark Spector. After learning that Moon Knight had taken in vampires under his protection, Dr. Batter terrorized the Nightwalkers to get his attention. Hunter's Moon eventually confronted Moon Knight, chastised him for taking in enemies of Khonshu, and expressed his intentions to correct him. Dr. Batter beat Moon Knight and invaded the Midnight Mission to kill the vampires, but Spectre recovered and knocked him unconscious after attacking him from behind. Which, you know what, after beating him, I'm not even gonna call it that's kinda shady. I respect it.
Number 10, Trapster. Oddly enough, although Trapster is a super weird and relatively obscure villain, he's still somehow made his way into a surprising number of comics. I mean, he has been around since the 60s, so considering that, I guess not so many, but we're still talking over 100 issues at least, which is pretty weird considering who Trapster is. Trapster is weird because, well, he was originally known as the guy who came armed with a glue gun, or a paste gun, if you will. Initially, he was known by the supervillain name Paste Pot Pete. However, Trapster has since come to loathe that name and much prefers to be called Trapster instead, as he feels the former name makes him sound lame and is often used out of disrespect for him. Admittedly, he is kinda lame though. Sorry Trapster, you might be a genius, but you still fight with glue. So, anyone that fights with a glue gun, I'm just saying. Although I will say if it was a hot glue gun burns do hurt a lot. Number 9, Polka Dot Man. You might think you know Polka Dot Man, but do you really know him? If you've seen the Suicide Squad, you are familiar with a version of Abner Krill, but the original Polka Dot Man, also Abner Krill of the New Earth continuity, was a little bit different when it came to his power set, at least initially. Initially, when Polka Dot Man, or Mr. Polka Dot, first appeared, he came armed with multiple different weapons, which all came from the polka dots on his suit. He could pull them off and basically turn them into any means of different weapons and devices, even once turning one into a getaway vehicle. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to talk more weird, obscure things from comics with me, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. This list actually has everything that I love. Weird, obscure, and villains. I love all of those things. Number 8, Vanisher. Vanisher was actually one of the first villains that the X-Men came up against way back in X-Men issue number 2. In short, he was weird because he gave the X-Men so much trouble, especially considering Marvel Girl was on the team and he was only a teleporter. Though at this time, they'd never encountered a teleporter before and were fairly new heroes. Also, Jean likely unknowingly had mental blocks in place. Vanisher's demise was also quite dark and odd when Professor X, who had left the X-Men to fight alone initially as a test, finally came to their aid and easily defeated Vanisher by making him forget who he was, which honestly is a pretty horrifying punishment. Don't worry though, that wouldn't be the end of Vanisher, and he'd also end up getting a much less extravagant costume. Which actually is kinda sad. I do like his original costume, with its whole thing. It's very red and patterned. Number 7. Crazy Quilt. Crazy Quilt actually might sound familiar to you in terms of his overall personality and demeanor, as it seems like the version of Polka Dot Man that we saw in the Suicide Squad, to me at least, is actually closer to a combination of the original Polka Dot Man mixed with, well, this villain, Crazy Quilt. Crazy Quilt was Paul Decker, a painter and criminal who left clues in his artwork as to his criminal plots. Eventually, he was apprehended, left blinded by a gunshot wound in the scuffle. He would regain his sight through an experimental procedure where his optic nerves were attached to a helmet, but the blinding colors that he would see would cause him to go insane. At least when I was watching the Suicide Squad, I was like, this Polka Dot Man kinda reminds me of Polka Dot Man mixed with Crazy Quilt, cause he's so crazy. Number 6. UNUS the Untouchable. Another villain who almost foiled the X-Men in their early days was UNUS. UNUS the Untouchable was a mutant who couldn't be touched by those who would do harm to him, making him seemingly invincible when he first came up against the X-Men in issue 8. His power was also weirdly specific, as it didn't repel all things from him, and mainly seemed to target those who fought against him and projectiles that would do him harm. Beast was the one to help defeat him when he learned of his true nature in a wrestling match against him. This was during a brief moment when Hank McCoy left the team. When UNUS turned to a life of crime, Beast was the one to stop him by creating a device that intensified his power, causing everything to be repelled from UNUS, including food. Starving, UNUS eventually agreed to stay on the straight and narrow, and Beast returned his power levels to how they once were, allowing UNUS to return to his wrestling career. Number 5. Ruby Thursday. Ruby Thursday is a super weird villain who I still can't even really believe to this day actually exists. But she does. I believe she was kinda designed as a character on a dare, but don't quote me on that story, as it's just something I remember reading somewhere. I didn't have time to go back and double check all that, but I'm pretty sure her creation story is something like someone dared someone to create a thing. It's a good story if you want to go check it out. Her creation is credited to Steve Gerber and Sal Buscema, and she first appeared in Defenders issue 32 in the 70s. Her whole thing is that she is a sexy villain lady, but in the place of where her head should be, she instead has a big red ball that is made up of organic circuitry and thereby gives her powers, while also acting as a stand-in head, because you still need a head to do things, so yeah. Number 4. Spook. A villain I love to talk about, but whom no one really seems to remember apparently. Val Caliban was a master escape artist who first appeared in Detective Comics back in the 70s. He was initially caught and long thought to be dead after being executed, or at least we thought he was executed, appearing in an almost ghost-inspired robe of a costume. In reality, Caliban had survived using his skills of hypnosis and escapism. He was also privy to the architectural plans of the prison as he'd worked to help design it. Thereby, he was able to exploit that knowledge and use it to escape. Honestly, it was pretty silly of them to try to put him in a prison that he'd designed, in my opinion. Years later though, he wouldn't be so lucky when changes had been made to its design and he ended up back in the prison again. And he'd be even more unlucky when he ran into Damian Wayne. It's Damian Wayne. Number 3. Gaggy. Gaggy was the sidekick of Joker. Before there was Harley Quinn, there was Gaggy. Although to be clear, Joker and Gaggy were not in a romantic relationship. Just thought I'd point that out. They were simply partners in crime. In fact, when Harley did start coming around, it was later revealed that Gaggy actually became jealous of her, and even that she was perhaps the reason for Gaggy's fall from glory in the Joker's eyes. At least that was how Gaggy saw it. He basically blamed Harley for all of it. More recently, Gaggy made a reappearance in the Batman 3 Jokers limited series, but sadly, he was killed off in that book, being eaten by a Joker shark. R.I.P. Gaggy. I love how Gaggy came back and then they were like, he's dead. I was like, oh, okay. Bye. Number 2. Tattered Damalion. Tattered Damalion is by all accounts a pretty weird and obscure villain, who at one point was stopped by Dazzler. He doesn't really have any powers, but instead has some kind of forgotten skills, possibly. He started out initially as a tap dancer who found fame in the movies with his dancing partner Julia Walker. Knowing eventually his star would dim, he invested money in a casino in Las Vegas, but later, after he retired to run it, was swindled out of his investment and money by criminals. Following that, he became a derelict and ended up allied with the committee. He eventually would become the crazed criminal Tattered Damalion, who sought to destroy money and material possessions as a means of revenge for what had unfairly happened to him. Honestly, it seems pretty fair of him to go that route. Eventually, Daz stopped him and helped to reunite him with his former dance partner Julia Walker, but eventually she would grow tired of looking after him. which also, fair. Number 1. SNOWFLAME. SNOWFLAME was originally a villain that first appeared in the 80s in DC Comics, making his first appearance in New Guardians issue number 2, and coincidentally, his last appearance as well, in the New Earth continuity anyways. SNOWFLAME's powers are fueled by drugs, which grant him superhuman speed, strength, pyrokinesis, and made him numb to pain. He could also infect other people, intoxicating them merely by touching them. And guess what? There's more. It gets better. In 2020, he actually made a return in the Prime Earth continuity, appearing in the 2018 Catwoman series in issue number 23. So while he still remains obscure, he's also kind of recently renew as well.
Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Mojo. I'll start this list off with a rather fun one. Not that any villain isn't fun, but when Mojo's involved, it always gets a little too weird in some way. He made his first debut in Longshot issue 3. Mojo is known for using Earth as forms of TV entertainment for the universe. So we're all actors. I'm in your screen right now. I'm actually part of Mojo's universe. I'm not even real. And his power increases the more viewers that he gets for this interdimensional TV show. So if you subscribe and like this video, maybe I'll get more powerful too, who knows? He's part of a race called the Spineless Beings. They're from a planet called Mojo World, of course, inside a pocket dimension called the Mojoverse. So it's all about him, we get it. He messes with the Avengers in a pretty dramatic way as well, especially in Avengers Annual 1. The Avengers of the Supernatural. Wow, there is a title right there. So in this issue, Mojo abducted the Avengers and created another supernatural version of the team. And if that wasn't weird enough, he made them participate in this reality show called Martian Transylvania Superhero Mutant Monster Hunter High School, which is just a mouthful. Basically, the mutants of the Unity division were goths, the others were football players and cheerleaders, and the Avengers of the Supernatural were nerds. So he likes to play it weird. And before we continue on with this list of Avengers villains, guys, if you want to go ahead and give us more power by giving us a like down there, and if you haven't subscribed already, you might as well click that, and then you can see all our videos pop up. We do all the work for you. We'll just show up in your phone. Number 9, the Leader. Samuel Stearns, aka the Leader, made his first debut in Tales to Astonish issue 62. He was working one night at a chemical research plant, and when he was moving canisters of waste material, one of the canisters broke open, covering him in gamma radiation. God, everybody is so clumsy in comics all the time. Just so many spills. So of course, after the spill, Stearns survived just like Banner did after his gamma accident, but the only difference was it affected him in a much different way. See, he didn't get angrier, he got smarter and smarter, because now his brain could absorb so much more and more information. It actually got to a point where his physical body started to mutate. So now he has this giant green brain head. His head just keeps getting bigger and bigger. It looks like a gushy balloon just about to pop any second. Of course he's a villain. Look at his head. I mean, no offense, but come on, I'd be upset too. That's all I'm saying. I'd be pretty upset. He started to refer to himself as the Leader, using his intellect to become a criminal mastermind, and he clashed with the other Gamma guy, Banner. In fact, he actually ruined Betty and Bruce's wedding once. He's kind of a jerk. But he's gone after the Avengers as well. When the Red Hulk gave Stearns red gamma treatment to enhance him even more, becoming the Red Leader, he became a member of the Thunderbolts. Number 8, the Mandarin. Ah yes, the first time Marvel told us that the popular enhanced individual was actually an actor all along. The Mandarin. He was in Iron Man 3, kind of. I mean, I'm including him on this list because that version wasn't even close to what he's really like. He made his first appearance in Tales of Suspense issue 50. While exploring the inside of a cave in the Valley of the Spirits, he found an alien ship and a passenger still in there as well, named Axon Carr. But while he was there, he also saw 10 rings, these powerful rings, each representing a new power. So he took them, you know, because he's a villain. Then after finishing off the alien pilot, he began to study these rings and he began mastering them as well. So if he wears them all at once, his mind will be reached by the spirits trapped within the rings. Yeah, he's a pretty sick villain. And then in Iron Man 3, his name's Trevor and he just like crushes beer. Number 7, Grim Reaper. This next one we thought we were gonna see in WandaVision, but we thought wrong. We thought maybe if it wasn't Mephisto, it's probably Grim Reaper, but we were wrong on both. The Grim Reaper did not show up, but his silhouette did for a hot second, maybe. Eric Williams made his debut back in Avengers issue 52. He's the brother of Simon Williams, aka Wonder Man. He was considered a black sheep of the family, and when he was younger, he accidentally burnt down his house after, you guessed it, being clumsy with chemicals. The usual. So his brother felt responsible for not stopping him or being there for him when watching him. So after that, he began to watch him closely, a little bit too close, because Eric then became rebellious because of the supervision, and then soon he ended up with the Mafia in Las Vegas while his brother stayed and took over the family business. So with the business failing, no thanks to Stark being the top dog in innovation, he turns to his brother for some mob help to get things going again. So Simon embezzled money with Eric, but Simon got caught and thrown into the slammer. Went thrown right to jail. So Baron Zemo approached him, asked for help to take out the Avengers, and revenge on Stark was included. So he was like, sure, this sounds like a pretty sweet gig. So then he got turned into Wonder Man, but he ended up saving the Avengers from Zemo's trap. He turned, he went good guy. But his brother, Eric, he heard of Simon's untimely departure, so he got angry and felt tremendous guilt after this. So he contacted the Tinkerer, who gave him a scythe. Then he took on the name of Grim Reaper, and voila, we now have a pretty badass villain. Number 6, Enchantress, aka Amora. She made her first debut in Journey into Mystery issue 103, and she has a love-hate relationship with Thor. And I'm not gonna lie, she's got a pretty sweet gig. She's got multiple mansions throughout the 9 realms, and she can make gold and diamonds with her tears. So even if she gets stood up on prom, she's gonna cry a few diamonds, and then she has more bling for the next date. So it's a win-win. She's really good at seducing people as well, like Scourge, for example. She would seduce him into helping her with her evil plans. But Amora wouldn't follow through with her side of the deal. She would just play hard to get, and she would mess with his mind and his heart. Now in the comics, she was sent by Odin to take out Jane Foster, but when she tried to attack Jane, of course, her love Thor intervened, and that's when she was banished to Earth by Odin. And then her next logical step as a villain is to join the Masters of Evil and get in line for taking down Thor or any of his annoying super teammates. Her tool is seduction, just one kiss, and that's all it takes to make you fall under her control. She doesn't have too much experience with hand-to-hand combat because she doesn't really need it. She just gets other dudes to fight her battles for her. What a boss. Number 5, Kang. This guy we can actually look forward to knowing more about soon, as he's confirmed for the next Ant-Man sequel with actor Jonathan Majors set to play him. But just who is Kang the Conqueror? Why is this a big deal for the Avengers? Well, he made his first appearance in Avengers issue 8 back in 1964, and Kang has seen many centuries. His powers allow him to travel through time, and his futuristic suit of armor is built with weapons that can take on beings from any of those timelines. He's super smart and of course travels with armies, with each warrior equipped with the same armor and weaponry, so the fights aren't exactly easy by any means. The time travel stuff also doesn't come without consequence either. See, as Kang travels more and more through time, he creates time-displaced duplicates, and with the cosmic multiversal route that Marvel's going with now in the MCU, and especially with Loki's show, we can probably look forward to some more mind-bending battles. Number 4, Taskmaster. Taskmaster made his first comic book debut in Avengers 195. Anthony Masters is a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, of course, who turned into a mercenary and assassin. Although he is one guy, he has this ability where he can copy your every move. So he can replicate your physical skills. He has photographic reflexes, so he can watch Black Widow take down an evil henchman, and bam, he's got it locked into his brain. He knows how to do the same type of combat as well. He's actually the villain of the Black Widow movie, but that has yet to come out due to COVID delays, so the general public doesn't really know how cool this guy is yet. He became a teacher based out of the Taskmaster's Academy to train villains and agents, one of those agents being US agent John Walker, who is currently turning heads for all the wrong reasons in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now in the comics, it was actually Taskmaster who taught Walker how to throw Cap's shield so well. In Avengers issue 196, he was able to capture Yellow Jacket, the Wasp, and Ant-Man, and then when the rest of the team showed up, he took them on as well, only being defeated because he could not predict the movements of the robot Jocasta. Otherwise, it's a tough battle, this one for sure. Number 3, Mephisto. While on the topic of characters that we wanted to see in the MCU, I of course gotta talk about the devil himself. He made his first appearance as a serpent in Bible Tales for Young Folk issue 1, but he made his first full appearance as Mephisto in Silver Surfer issue 3. I don't think I have to explain too much about this guy or why he's a threat. I mean, he's Satan. He's the literal devil of the Marvel Universe. He lives comfortably in hell with lesser demons that serve him. The reason we thought we were gonna get Mephisto in WandaVision goes back to something he did in the comics, which was kind of a big deal. The comic was Avengers West Coast Volume 2, issue 52. We find out the truth behind Scarlet Witch's children, Billy and Tommy, who were in WandaVision. Now it turns out the 5 pieces of Pandemonium's soul were actually Mephisto. So Mephisto tricked Pandemonium and gathered beings possessing the appropriate fragments, and 2 of those 5 fragments just happen to be children of the Scarlet Witch and the Vision. So when Pandemonium arrived, he took the kids, which in turn gave Mephisto full strength, and this left Scarlet Witch having a breakdown. Mephisto's awesome. His deals are always crazy. Like after the comic Civil War, when everybody knew Spider-Man's identity, Spider-Man had to make a deal with Mephisto in order to save Aunt May because she got shot because he revealed his name to the public. So he's pretty wild. That's just one of many, many horrible deals. Number 2, MODOK. Making its first appearance in Tales of Suspense issue 93, MODOK was created by Dr. George Tarleton. He had worked with the team recently to create the Cosmic Cube, but the scientist supreme, Lyle Getz, figured the next logical step was figuring out a way to understand the powers inside said cube. So enter Project MODOK. Spelt with a C at the end, not a K, that's important. So MODOK stood for Mental Organism Designed Only for Computing. Sounds like the perfect tool to analyze and probe this cosmic cube. So they grabbed that scientist George that I mentioned and altered him into this big-headed supercomputer. With a brain too big for his body, they had to give him a hover chair, which is referred to as the Doomsday Chair. I mean, he's already a villain. You guys are just kind of making this happen for him. The scientists did not prepare that with great power comes great superiority, so it wasn't long before MODOK overtook his masters, changed that last letter from a C to a K, making his new, more suitable name for the list, MODOK, which stood for Mental Organism Designed Only for Killing. He's the big bad villain in the new Avengers PS4 game, and he's as crazy as it sounds in that game as well. And finally, number 1, Morgan Le Fay. Now, with the Marvel Cinematic Universe leaning into the witch madness for the conclusion of WandaVision, we might actually get to see Morgan Le Fay on the big screen soon enough. She made her first appearance in Black Knight issue 1 back in 1955, and she's been a recurring villain to the Avengers in the comics for a while now. And when the Dark Avengers were formed by Norman Osborn, Morgan was their first enemy to face off against. She's a powerful spellcaster, one of those spells being reality warping by using these Norn stones. So she packs a punch. Elizabeth Hurley actually plays Morgan Le Fay in the show Runaways, and she's great when it comes to these witchy, devilish roles. I mean, she literally played the devil in the movie Bedazzled as well, which is pretty funny. She was made for the role, it seems.